to the World War II newspaper channel where we read the Chicago Tribune one day at a time, going through World War II as it happened through the eyes of those who lived it. If you enjoy content like this, please subscribe to this channel and click on the bell icon to get notifications when a new upload is going to premiere. And also, if you want to hear the actual newsmakers, go check out my other channel, the companion channel to this one, the World War II Old Time Radio channel. There we have vintage broadcasts, including newscasts, speeches, old movies, and music. And subscribe to that channel and click on the bell icon. Now for the newspaper. News as read from the Chicago Tribune for Wednesday, January 15th, 1941. Henry Chapp reporting. The weather today. The sun rose at 7:16 a.m. It set at 4:44 p.m. For Chicago and vicinity, cloudy Wednesday and Thursday with occasional light rain, freezing at times. Not much change in temperature, moderate east to southeast winds. The low temperature, 24 degrees. The high temperature, 29. Today's headline, Need Arms Free. Churchill tells Hopkins won't ask large army from overseas in 41. Washington, D.C., January 14th. Secretary of the Treasury Henry Morgenthau will be asked to make public a confidential balance sheet on British financial resources in the United States at hearings before the House Foreign Affairs Committee on President Roosevelt's request for war dictatorship powers. The hearings will begin at 10 a.m. tomorrow. Representative Saul Bloom, Democrat, New York, chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, announced that the administration witnesses in order would be Secretary of State Cordell Hull, Secretary Morgenthau, Secretary of War Henry L. Stimson, Secretary of the Navy Frank Knox, and William S. Knudsen, Director of Defense Production Management. Republican members said they would ask Morgenthau to submit a balance sheet recently presented to him by Sir Frederick Phillips, Undersecretary of the British Treasury. They intend to ask Morgenthau about a report issued by the Federal Reserve Board last week indicating that the British have unobligated resources of approximately $7 billion in this country. Such an admission by Morgenthau would strengthen the demand of the non-interventionists that loans of arms and other war supplies be withheld from the British until they have exhausted their dollar assets and that they be required to put up security for credit to extend them. Secretary Hull is to be asked to state whether President Roosevelt's request for authority to open American ports for the outfitting and repairing of British warships would not be an act of war under the Hague Convention of 1907, to which the United States and Germany are signatories, as well as under any recognized theory of international law. Secretary Knox will be asked to reaffirm his recent statement that the Navy cannot spare any more destroyers or any warships for Great Britain. Under the War Powers Bill, President Roosevelt could lend or give away the whole United States fleet to Great Britain or any other country whose assistance he might deem beneficial to the defense of the United States. Under the same authority, he could purchase the French fleet at any price he might wish to pay and give it to Great Britain. Minority members of the House Committee agreed at a meeting this afternoon on information they will seek to elicit at the hearing and amendments to be offered to the bill. They agreed also to demand that the chairman and ranking minority members of the Military and Naval Affairs Committees be permitted to participate in the questioning of Stimson and Knox. Speaking for the minority committee members, Representative Hamilton Fish, Republican, New York, ranking minority member, denounced the bill as unconstitutional and destructive of free government. He said it should be amended in at least 10 respects, including the following. Number 1, prohibit the president from giving away any part of our Navy without the consent of Congress. Number 2, prohibit the president from sending convoys of American ships into the war zones or sending American warships to convoy British vessels. Number 3, restrict financial obligations that may be incurred under the bill to $2 billion. Number 4, prohibit the building, repairing, or outfitting of belligerent warships in American ports. Fish recalled that his grandfather, Secretary of State Hamilton Fish, collected $15 million and an apology from Great Britain after the Civil War, during which the British permitted the outfitting of the Confederate Raider Alabama. Number 5, require the British to give security for any arms and war supplies lent to them. The security, Fish said, might include rubber and tin and title in fee simple to the British Western Hemisphere possessions exclusive of Canada and Newfoundland. Chairman Bloom said a number of other witnesses, including General Robert E. Wood, head of the America First Committee, had asked to be heard by the committee and that they would be accommodated. Fish sent telegrams to a number of prominent individuals urging them to appear and present their views on the president's dictatorship bill. Some of those appealed to by Fish were Colonel Charles A. Lindbergh, Thomas E. Dewey, Herbert Hoover, Wendell Willkie, General Charles G. Dawes, William C. Bullitt, former ambassador to France, Joseph P. Kennedy, ambassador to Great Britain, Roy Howard, newspaper publisher, Henry McCracken, president of Vassar College, Hugh Wilson, special assistant secretary of state and former ambassador to Germany, Norman Thomas, socialist leader, Hanford McNider, former assistant secretary of war, General Hugh S. Johnson, Cardinal William O'Connell of Boston, and Edward Spofford, past commander of the American Legion. Chairman Bloom said he would be pleased to have all these individuals testify, but would not call on them. Consideration of the War Powers Bill by the Senate Foreign Relations Committee was delayed by the illness of Chairman Walter F. George, Democrat, Georgia. Senator Pat Harrison, Democrat, Mississippi, ranking majority member, announced that a meeting called for tomorrow had been canceled and that the committee would meet at the call of the chairman. Senator Arthur Capper, Republican, Kansas, delivered the first blast against the War Powers Bill on the Senate floor today. I am unalterably opposed to granting the unlimited dictatorial powers asked by the president for himself and provided in this measure, he said. I am opposed to intervention by the United States in Europe's wars, which are not our wars, even when such entrance is camouflaged in the name of national defense. I do not favor the view that Britain is our own Maginot Line on which we depend for national defense. In the last analysis, we must defend ourselves. Alluding to President Roosevelt's annual message of January 6th, Senator Capper said he opposed the grandiose idea that the destiny of the United States is to police the world. Before we undertake to guarantee freedom of expression, freedom of religion, freedom from want, and freedom from fear everywhere in the world, we should first set an example by making secure these freedoms in the United States. The people of the United States will pay a heavy price in blood and sweat and tears and taxes and post-war depression if they forget the silly old dollar sign in our foreign relations and in the affairs of our own federal government. Citing President Roosevelt's admission in the January 6th message that the defense program in some very important cases is proceeding so slowly as to cause concern, Senator Henry Cabot Lodge, Republican, Massachusetts, today introduced a resolution calling for the creation of a 10-member Joint Congressional Committee to investigate all contracts awarded by the Army and Navy. Such an investigation should be conducted, Lodge declared, for the sake of our national security and in order to know just how and where it is possible to extend maximum aid to Great Britain, Greece, and China. We remember that the revelations about the weakness in our national defense, which were made last winter, came as a result of congressional investigation, Lodge told the Senate. The fact, for example, that at any time we could put only a fully equipped army of 75,000 into the field, and the fact that all of our airplanes in the light of the European battle experience were obsolete. These facts led to an aroused public opinion, which finally demanded and obtained real action from the government. We need facts more than ever today. We need a complete presentation not only of how much we can do, but also showing what we can't do. A knowledge of our limitations is as important as a knowledge of our capabilities. Washington, D.C., January 14th. The endorsement given by Wendell Willkie to the Roosevelt blank check bill to lend and lease unlimited quantities of military equipment to Great Britain and other belligerents has produced a profound political repercussions in the Republican Party. As a result of the stand he has taken, the position of Mr. Willkie as a titular leader of his party has been seriously damaged. His attitude has been applauded by a small minority of the party, chiefly along the eastern seaboard, that is no less strongly interventionist than the president, but repudiated by the overwhelming majority of the party, according to Republican leaders in Congress. In the opinion of Republican leaders here, the influence of the Republican candidate for president last November has been impaired to such an extent that he will be disregarded in the selection of a chairman of the Republican National Committee to succeed Representative Joseph W. Martin Jr. of Massachusetts, who has said he will resign in March. The movement for the selection of Willkie for the chairmanship has suddenly blown up. It is so evident that any candidate relying for election chiefly on Willkie's recommendation would fare no better. With Alf Landon of Kansas, Herbert Hoover of California, Senator Arthur Vandenberg of Michigan, and Senator Robert A. Taft of Ohio lined up against Willkie on this issue, Republican leaders here look for the selection of a Westerner for chairman. There is strong support for the theory that the rejuvenation of the party should be entrusted to an outstanding Republican of the Middle West, the region that distinguished itself in the election of Republican candidates last November. Rome, January 14th. A double line of British convoys loaded with troops and supplies to replace losses in North Africa and Greece has been battered by a 5-day Axis sea and air offensive in the Mediterranean, fascist editor Virginia Gaeta reported today. All told, official and unofficial Italian sources say that 15 enemy vessels have been sunk or damaged. The fascist high command has placed the score at 10 British warships hit, of which a submarine and a cruiser were reported sunk. Today's war bulletin said the enemy submarine was sent to the bottom on January 9th by Italian planes and motor torpedo boats. Previous communiques since last Friday have listed hits on a battleship of Britain's 31,000-ton Malaya class, 2 aircraft carriers, 2 cruisers, 3 destroyers, and a big warship. Gaeta said the 1,335-ton British destroyer Gallant apparently was sunk, and the newspaper Il Popolo di Roma declared a second submarine sunk, a third cruiser, and 2 steamers hit. Gaeta said in the newspaper Il Giornale d'Italia that the Gallant probably was sunk on January 10th, the day the High Command reported a cruiser was left sinking and 2 destroyers spouting flame after an attack by Italian torpedo boats or British warships in the Strait of Sicily. He said sailors' caps and wreckage bearing the destroyer's name had been recovered from the Mediterranean. The sinking of a small Italian steamer by a Greek submarine in the Adriatic was acknowledged in today's High Command communique. London, January 14th. Britain's 23,000-ton aircraft carrier Illustrious and the 9,100-ton cruiser Southampton were damaged on January 10th, the Admiralty announced tonight, in the first reported use of German dive bombers in the Mediterranean area. Italian and German planes cooperated in the attack on warships which were convoying merchant vessels to Greece with material assistance for the Albanian campaign, it was stated. The 1,335-ton destroyer Gallant was damaged earlier by a mine or a torpedo, the Admiralty said, when the convoy encountered 2 Italian destroyers. One of the Italian ships, a vessel of the 638-ton Spica class, was reported sunk. The other escaped. The Gallant reached port safely, it was reported. The surface encounter and the later aerial attack, which the Admiralty said cost the Nazi fascist forces 12 planes and damage to a further number, took place in the Sicilian Channel between Sicily and North Africa. The extent of the damage and the number of casualties suffered on board the Illustrious and the Southampton were not specified. Naval circles, however, said one bomb on the flight deck of the Illustrious would put the carrier almost completely out of action until repairs could be made. It was from the deck of the Illustrious that the British planes took off last November 11th for their major attack on the Italian naval base at Taranto, crippling the Italian fleet. The idea that Germany might be intending to concentrate on the British Mediterranean fleet both to strengthen Italy and hold up supplies to Greece was supported in part by an Air Force communique from Cairo today, which said very heavy damage had been caused to the air base at Catania, Sicily, Sunday night. London quarters believe the Nazis have established a large airbase at Catania and noted that the communique said 9 planes, apparently Junkers 87s or dive bombers, were destroyed. 2 British planes failed to return from the attack. London, January 14th. An Air Ministry statement that British night fighter planes are beginning to show results against nocturnal raiders bolstered hopes of Britons tonight. Last night's massive firebomb raid on the southwest port of Plymouth, the target of 10,000 incendiaries and many tons of high explosives, showed, however, that Britain has far to go in coping with the night raiders, and the Air Ministry admitted as much. Telling of efforts to fend off night raids, the Air Ministry News Service said more and more Nazi bombers are being intercepted, and those getting through are being attacked with some success. The number of night fighter squadrons is steadily increasing, it said, but added that progress necessarily was slow because the pilots have to be taught an entirely new technique. One night fighter pilot was quoted as saying his job was like trying to swat a wasp in a blackout room. Germany is working on similar lines, the news service asserted, but so far the night tactics of the British have proved more successful because none of our night fighters have been lost in action. Up to a late hour tonight, there were no reports of German air activity over any part of Britain. The Germans also had stayed away in daylight. It was believed that bad weather on the continent, coupled with recent daylight raids by the British on French airdromes, were responsible. A dense mist in the Dover Strait restricted visibility to barely 100 yards. London, January 14th. Shipping losses through enemy action for the week ending January 6 totaled 14,687 tons, the lowest figure in 8 months, the Admiralty announced today. In only 4 weeks of the war have the figures been less. Excluding the losses at Dunkirk, this lowers the weekly average losses to 62,536 tons. Since the Black Week early in December, when 128,000 tons were sunk, there has been a steady fall in losses, and some observers have attributed this to Air Force raids thinning out German submarine bases. The drop in shipping losses, however, has failed so far to show its effect on the food situation. The Ministry of Food today urged people to eat more potatoes, carrots, and oatmeal. Crops of potatoes and carrots were excellent last year, the Food Ministry pointed out. Montevideo, Uruguay, January 14th. British aerial scouts from an unidentified warship joined the British auxiliary cruiser Asturias tonight on sentry patrol to forestall the French freighter Mendoza's efforts to run the British blockade with sorely needed food for France. The disclosure that the British are using planes came from one of them, out of fuel, set down on Maldonado Bay tonight. The 3 flyers were placed under guard and the plane towed ashore. The flyers declined to say what ship they were from, but Uruguayan officials speculated that the plane probably was from the cruiser Enterprise, British South Atlantic flagship. The Mendoza, which sailed today on its 3rd attempt to run the blockade, was reported tonight to have anchored at Punta del Este harbor up the Uruguayan coast. Berlin, January 14th. Cruising German warplanes sank a 4,000-ton merchant ship and scored 2 bomb hits on a British cruiser, the German High Command reported today. Planes were said to have continued spreading mines along England's vital sea lanes. Chongqing, China, January 14th. The south bank of the Yangtze River below the United States Embassy was machine-gunned today as Japanese planes flew over the capital area. Hong Kong, January 14th. Chinese military chiefs today alleged the Japanese used poison gas shells during fighting at Anqing, capital of Anhui Province. The Chinese declared poison gas was used while the Japanese were retreating. However, it was claimed there were no Chinese casualties. The Chinese made a similar allegation last year during a Chinese offensive in Hunan Province. London, January 14th. Information Minister Alfred Duff Cooper told the British Broadcasting Corporation's radio audience tonight that the spirit of France is alive and growing in vigor. Britain, he said, has evidence that sympathy for her cause in France is growing with remarkable rapidity. That statement, he added, not unnaturally is growing faster in occupied France, where the hateful presence of the German reminds the people day by day of what they have lost and what is their one hope of regaining it. Hamilton, Bermuda, January 14th. A large quantity of vitamin pills seized January 6th by British officials from Madame Elsa Schiaparelli, the fashion designer who was en route to Paris, have been released for conveyance to unoccupied France, it was announced tonight. The announcement said the pills would be delivered to the American Friends Service Committee. They were gifts of Americans. When seized, the British said they were contraband. Ankara, Turkey, January 14th. Military discussions, which observers said might affect the course of the war in the Mediterranean, the Balkans, and Africa, began today between British and Turkish officers. London, January 14th. At least 18 American organizations in England and 400 others in the United States are helping Britain with hospital equipment, Red Cross units, money, clothing, and other gifts, as well as personnel to battle the rigors of the Blitzkrieg, a survey today revealed. This American aid, representing a total of many millions of dollars, comes outside the scope of the British government's own scheme to alleviate the distress resulting from bombings and other wartime hardships. The most important American organizations assisting the British on the spot are the Allied Relief Fund, which has merged with the British War Relief Fund but is functioning separately, and the American Red Cross. Among others are the 1st American Motorized Squadron and the American Unit of the Home Guard, which Prime Minister Winston Churchill inspected last week. Elizabeth City, North Carolina, January 14th. 5 long-range American-built bombers took off from the Pasquotank River here today for Bermuda, their first stop on a flight to Great Britain to join in the defense of England. The twin motorized planes, each with a cruising range of 4,000 miles, were built by the Consolidated Aircraft Corporation at San Diego, California. Their American crews will deliver them to British flyers in Bermuda. London, January 14th. Britain's war effort now is costing about $53 million a day. It cost $38 million daily in 1940. Army, Navy, and Air Force costs combined averaged about $47,628,000 daily in the first 11 days of 1941. The rest went for interest and management, national debt, and ordinary expenditures. Sofia, Bulgaria, January 14th. Bulgaria issued a formal denial today that any foreign troops had entered the country, thereby taking the first official published notice of foreign reports of German troop movements here. The denial was made through the government news agency. It said further there had been no representations to foreign powers concerning such a possibility. A rumor was circulated that the Third International had requested friends in Bulgaria to investigate the number of German civilians here. Private sources have said that several hundred were in the country, some as technical advisors for the army. Berlin, January 14th. There is increased tension in the atmospheres in official quarters and diplomatic centers here today. Italy's ambassador and publicity expert Guido Rocco is in Berlin, and his appearance usually coincides with important negotiations between Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini. Word continues to circulate that France's Admiral Jean Darlan, Naval Minister, and General Charles Hunsinger, War Minister, will soon resume conversations with German chiefs. Official spokesmen, however, denied that Hitler and Mussolini will meet within the next few days or that important negotiations are pending with the Vichy government. Officials denied that the Romanian Premier General Ion Antonescu is coming to Germany, while Romanian Green Shirts or Iron Guards indicated they believe that Antonescu or Horia Sima, leader of the Green Shirts, may declare that negotiations about the Danube, broken off December 21st in Bucharest, should be resumed soon after Russia considers the Danube an important subject of discussion for Southeastern Europe and the countries interested in it. Spain's Foreign Minister Ramon Serrano Suner suddenly is receiving more friendly publicity in Germany than he had received for some time. Egypt also is coming in for expressions of sympathy, with German papers carrying reports allegedly that English agents had plotted the assassination of King Farouk, his mother, and Arabian leaders. In the meantime, German emissaries are making speeches throughout Scandinavia. To win sympathy, one emissary, Hans Drager, said Denmark benefited from democracy contrary to the experiences of other countries. The German report of the emissary speech added that he showed understanding for the difficulties of a transition period, but he left no doubt that no one can, in the course of events, escape being drawn into the general trend of a Europe under German leadership. For the first time, the word Anschluss was mentioned in connection with Denmark. The German word Anschluss generally is translated as union or annexation. In the question of German-Danish relations, every Dane today stands before a clear alternative, the report said. Honest Anschluss would save Denmark from unrest and guarantee further development. German-Danish cooperation does not merely include the economic life. A stronger spiritual community of the European nation is necessary, in which kindred views of life from the basis of cooperation. Although Drager said Denmark's racial, state, economic, and cultural independence would not be touched, he warned that stubborn clinging to old ideas is not patriotic. It merely isolates a people in the stream of developments. Tomorrow, the first special train will leave Oslo with 500 Norwegian workers who will be employed in Germany. Paris, January 12th, via Berlin, delayed. The alienation of 11,000 Jewish-owned concerns in Paris is growing forward rapidly, officials said today, and all of the establishments are expected to be in the hands of non-Jewish owners soon. Of the 11,000 businesses, about 5,000 are retail stores. These are receiving first attention. The stores were first placarded with yellow signs labeling them Jewish. Lately, red signs have appeared indicating the business designated has been taken over by a commissar named by French authorities with the approval of the German occupation authorities. His function is to see that the business is promptly sold to an Aryan purchaser. German officials said American business concerns owned by Jews were to be treated the same as all others. The present anti-Jewish measures are only for occupied France, but it is expected the Vichy government will enact laws affecting the Jews of the entire country. A spokesman for the French government at Vichy recently said the Aryanization of Paris business was entirely a German affair. Jews are not immediately excluded from their property, but must leave when the sale is made and the money is transferred. Jews are still permitted to work in Aryan business houses. What will finally be done with them is a later care, an official said. German race laws have not yet been applied to French Jews, and the main test is the French law, under which confession of faith is the most important indication of race. Berlin, January 14th. DNB, official German news agency, reported today that two leading Norwegian Nazis, Commissar of Justice Ivar Resnes and Police Commissioner Jonas Lai, had enlisted in Major Vidkun Quisling's Standarte Nordland regiment to fight for the German cause. Creation of the regiment, the agency said, had found an enthusiastic reception among Norwegian Nazis. Tokyo, January 14th. Increased delicacy of United States-Japanese relations was reported by one Tokyo newspaper today to have prompted a 4-hour conference of Premier Prince Fumimaro Konoe with top-ranking Army and Navy officials. New York, January 14th. Japan's Premier Prince Fumimaro Konoe emphasized the hostility of the attitude of the United States towards Japan in a speech today to members of parliament and business and financial leaders, Domai Japanese news agency reported in a broadcast from Tokyo. The agency quoted him as having said this hostility is sufficiently characterized by America's support of England and China. Kanoy was addressing the first meeting of a 4-day series of conferences among cabinet ministers and members of parliament, financial business leaders, and press representatives. The agency said it is understood that Kanoy stressed the danger of worldwide disturbance, which is threatened by the growing pressure brought to bear on Japan by the United States and also by the latter's vigorous aid to Great Britain and the Chongqing China regime. Domai said the premier sought the parliamentarians' cooperation with the government in rendering national services to the state in pulling through the emergency period. Detailed explanations concerning the Japanese-Chinese war and the conflict in Europe were given by the War and Navy ministers, Domai said, and a frank exchange of views took place between the members of the parliament and cabinet ministers. Rome, January 14th. Pope Pius XII is considering issuing a solemn document against the barbaric and systematic bombing of civilian populations, it was learned today. Bern, Switzerland, January 14th. The Swiss Federal Council today announced it had made the necessary diplomatic representations after a session in which it discussed obviously international violations of Swiss neutrality by foreign planes flying over the country. The Council did not say whether the representations were made to London or Berlin or both. Switzerland previously has protested to Britain on the ground that British planes en route to raid Italy have flown over Swiss territory, and there have been recent reports of German planes also flying over the Little Republic. Jersey City, New Jersey, January 14th. The American export liner Excalibur delayed 30 hours when she was forced to heave to in a 70-mile-an-hour gale arrived from Lisbon today with 170 passengers, including 53 Americans. Arne Sunde, 57-year-old Norwegian Minister of Supply and Shipping, described how, with the coming of the Nazis, he fled into the mountains north of Oslo to take command of a group resisting the invasion. At the town of Dovie, D-O-V-I-E, Sunde said, his force surrounded 47 German parachute troops in a building and demanded they surrender. The German commander sent back a message saying, "We have 100 Norwegian prisoners in this building, including 50 women and children. Will you uselessly shed the blood of your compatriots? I have a radio connection with Oslo, and I can instantly order bombing planes to attack you." Asked what his response was, Sunde reported, "I gave them 10 minutes to surrender, and they did." Sunde escaped to London aboard a British cruiser. London, January 14th. Millions of persons in Britain will become mere experimental rabbits if the government proceeds with a scheme to introduce a standard bread with a high calcium content, Dr. L.J. Harris, honorary director of the Liverpool Institute of Research, warned today. Harris told a Liverpool audience there was no evidence Britain was suffering from a lack of calcium and urged Food Minister Lord Woolton to give the people protein bread made of wheat, potatoes, beans, and peas instead. It is estimated hundreds of thousands of people will have their lives shortened if the government persists in its calcium bread scheme, he declared. The new type of bread originally was to be sold to the public at the end of last year, but a medical research committee in London still is investigating. Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, January 14th. By a unanimous vote, the Vancouver City Council last night adopted a resolution urging the Dominion government to close 6 Japanese language schools in the city and to abrogate the Gentlemen's Agreement permitting restricted Japanese immigration to Canada. The council acted after an alderman charged the schools were maintained by the Education Department of the Japanese government, and the Japanese children will be required to attend after their classes in Vancouver schools. Vichy, France, January 14th. Under a 2-foot blanket of snow, conquered France is in the throes of its most tragic winter. 3 weeks of intense cold has spread hunger and death, and now flooded rivers brings the menace of another disaster. The Loire River, dammed by ice jams near its mouth, has risen 7 feet, flooding 2 small islands near Nantes. It is feared many persons perished. The river Saône, which runs through Lyons, and the Allier, which runs through Vichy, have frozen over, and a thaw may flood the region around here and the valley of the Rhone. From the north to the south of France, roads are blocked. Transportation is tied up, and many small communities are isolated. The cold, which has fastened its grip on Europe from Poland to Spain, varies from 10 degrees above 0 Fahrenheit at Paris to 31 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit in the hills and mountains near Clermont-Ferrand and Grenoble, 4 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit at Vichy, and 0 Fahrenheit at Lyons. The cold waves show no sign of relaxing. Papers report that scores of persons have been frozen in snowdrifts north of Marseille. 2 shepherds and 800 sheep froze to death. Near Toulouse and Grenoble, wild animals, hungry and cold, are raiding fields and villages. In various regions, stray dogs are killing sheep. Greatest difficulty is encountered in carrying food supplies over the snowbound roads. In Lyons, it is announced that people are eating cows, squirrels, hawks. Crows and hawks are shot as they raid villages for food. Greenstuffs and vegetables have disappeared in Vichy. Lack of fuel is causing great concern. Many restaurants in Vichy have closed because there is nothing to burn. Paris is reported to be receiving only 30% of the normal supply of coal. In Lyons, supplies are limited to 100 pounds a week, scarcely enough for the cook stoves. Some wood is being substituted. Even where supplies are available, deliveries cannot be made because of the lack of transportation, and elderly women carry home a pittance of coal or wood in wheelbarrows. Berlin, January 14th. German statistics claim a continued rise in the German birth rate for the first 8 months of 1940. During this period, 1,131,300 children were born in Germany as against 1,097,800 born in the corresponding period of 1939, it was stated. These figures were published in the German medical periodical Deutsches Ärzteblatt by Reich's health leader Dr. Conti. He said the general health of the German people remains good and that they have suffered no ill effects from the war rationing. War epidemics of typhoid and dysentery, he stated, were held down to a minimum during the first war year. The same, he stated, applies to German-occupied Poland, where there are fewer cases of spotted fever than ever before. Rome, January 14th. The wholesale price of potatoes will be increased progressively in the next 4 months to a maximum of about $3.50 per 110 pounds for ordinary quality under regulations announced today. Ordinary potatoes at present cost about $3. And now back to national news. New York, January 14th. Vern Marshall of Iowa, chairman of the No Foreign War Committee, tonight placed the non-interventionist organization on a national basis with the appointment of a national board of directors. He also established a policy committee to guide the committee's efforts in its fight against American involvement in war. The names of the members of this committee will be announced later. Marshall will serve on the board of directors. Washington, D.C., January 14th. President Roosevelt and Senator Burton K. Wheeler, Democrat, Montana, late today traded verbal punches over the latter's use of the phrase plow under every fourth American boy Sunday night in attacking the administration's bill to aid Britain. In clipped accents at his press conference, Mr. Roosevelt described the phrase as the most dastardly and rotten used in public life in his generation. Wheeler countered by asserting that the heat of the president's statement indicated that the chief executive had lost his temper. He expressed a hope that White House anger would not intimidate others from expression of honest opinion. Mr. Roosevelt opened the exchange at his press conference without mentioning the senator. He attributed the remark to several sources. Senator Wheeler had described the Aid Democracies bill as a New Deal AAA program, plow under every fourth American boy. To give his statement emphasis, the president allowed direct quotation of his remarks. Only rarely newspapermen are allowed to quote any words uttered by the president at press conferences. This time, permission was volunteered by the president as he delivered his verbal castigation of the senator. He said of the statement, "I regard it as the most untruthful, as the most dastardly, unpatriotic thing you or that has ever been said. You can quote me on that. That really is the rottenest thing that has been said in public life in my generation. Washington, D.C., January 14th. The government must have power to draft labor as well as industry for failure to cooperate in the production of aircraft and defense materials, Glenn L. Martin, president of the Martin Aircraft Company, told the House Naval Affairs Committee today. As for recommendations to rescue the defense program from disaster, Martin said, I think the government should have the power which would permit it to draft labor and industry. The power to draft industry already exists if it refuses to cooperate. The same power should exist for labor. I don't think you would have to use it, but it would prevent labor organizers from taking a bite into a bigger and bigger melon and trying to put the manufacturer in a jam through strikes. The existence of such power would settle all questions as to who was going to do what. Detroit, Michigan, January 14th. Acting to avert an interruption to airplane engine production, a federal labor conciliator today insisted that a CIO union end its strikes in 5 plants of the Eaton Manufacturing Company and that the company reopen its plants and rehire all strikers. James F. Dewey of the United States Department of Labor said that this marks the first time such a drastic step has been taken anywhere in the country. After conferring with an Eaton official this afternoon, Dewey said he was hopeful for a settlement tonight or Wednesday morning and that the company was cooperating in a plan to end the dispute. 4 plants in Michigan and 1 in Ohio employing more than 3,500 workers making defense equipment, including parts for airplane motors, were affected today by strikes called by the United Automobile Workers Union. John Owens, CIO advisor to the National Defense Commission, said in Washington that lack of Eaton manufactured parts might force suspension of production in several automobile plants and throw 30,000 employees out of work. Dewey said he conferred by telephone with Owens and John R. Steelman, head of the Labor Department's conciliation service, before seeking his conference this afternoon with the Eaton management. The Eaton strike spread today after picket line disorders at the company's Wilcox Rich division in Saginaw, Michigan, Monday resulted in injury to 5 policemen and 2 pickets. 27 persons were arrested. State police escorted non-strikers to work there today in complete absence of pickets. I am asking the company to rehire the strikers involved in a walkout last November 13th from the Saginaw plant, Dewey said, and to settle the controversy over the plants settle the controversy after the plants are operating again. This is an urgent matter of national defense. The company made an agreement with the union in December to rehire the strikers in the Saginaw plant within 7 days, but they did not do it. New York, January 14th. The National Defense Program in its relation to problems of banking was discussed today at the annual meetings of the Chase National Bank, the nation's largest, and the National City Bank of New York. Winthrop W. Aldrich, chairman of Chase National, urged that the federal government finance the defense program as far as possible by raising taxes and selling securities directly to the public to avoid inflation. An immense amount of money is seeking sound investment, Aldrich told the bank shareholders. The owners of savings and investment funds will be ready and willing to lend them to the government. He suggested new bonds to be issued should carry a fair rate of return, be available in small as well as large denominations, and be fully taxable. Aldrich said there is a limit beyond which taxation for defense should not go. This, he said, is the point at which taxation becomes destructive in the sense that it encroaches upon the capital equipment of the country. The banker endorsed current congressional bills to give the administration full power to extend aid to countries opposing ruthless aggression, but said the grant of power should be temporary. Aldrich said the easy way to finance defense requirements would be to place the principal share of new funds required with banks, but that it was unwise to do so. New York, January 14th. Progress in the medical and surgical treatment of war casualties has been so marvelous since the World War that a much larger proportion of the wounded are saved now, Dr. Philip D. Wilson, chief surgeon of the New York Hospital for the for the ruptured and crippled, said on his arrival here with 170 passengers aboard the American export liner Excalibur. All new faces are being made, pain has been almost eliminated, and infection has been controlled through a policy of careful neglect, he said. Dr. Wilson, who also is clinical professor of orthopedic surgery at the Columbia University School of Medicine, went to London 4 months ago as founder and medical director of the American Hospital in Britain Incorporated. He was attached to the hospital at Basingstoke, 50 miles southwest of London, and with United States Associates helped treat civilian war victims. The softest place now in England is in the Army, he said. It is the civilians who are taking the rap. Even so, he added, civilian casualties from intensive Nazi air raids never have totaled more than 10,000 to 12,000 a month, compared with a minimum of 30,000 anticipated by British authorities. The next few months may be critical for civilians, however, he warned, because of the danger of a general outbreak of pneumonia due to living conditions in air raid shelters. Speaking on the basis of his recent experience at 3 years in field hospitals in France during the World War, Dr. Wilson said, 25 years ago, we dressed wounds daily, and a doctor and 2 nurses would be busy with dressings all day. You could hear the poor devil screaming as the dressing cart was wheeled in. Today, we enclose the wounds in plaster of Paris and give them sulfonamide or one of its modifications. We don't touch the wounds for 4 or 5 weeks. They get fat and healthy. It's a policy of careful neglect. We don't transfer fresh infection into the wounds as we did when we dressed them every day. Pain is eliminated by complete immobilization of the patient. I am sure we have saved limbs that would have been lost in the last war. Dr. Wilson said his unit has been doing such a great deal of facial reconstruction. The great problem of facial injuries is burns, he said, particularly among the pilots. Their uniforms are fire resistant and protect their bodies, but when their planes catch fire, they are terribly burned on the hands and face. The poor devils' faces are burned beyond recognition, noses are gone, ears gone, mouths drawn in, chins gone. Usually their eyes are saved because they instinctively close them. Albany, New York, January 14th. Governor Herbert H. Lehman, who last week devoted his entire message at the opening of the legislative session to a discussion of the war situation, today sent the body a second message which included normal peacetime legislation he had previously ignored entirely. As in his first war speech, today's message paralleled President Roosevelt's recent martial bristling, but eventually got around to urging legislators to enact an outline program to improve business and promote social welfare within the state. For the first time, the Democratic governor urged state participation in the St. Lawrence Seaway Project, a proposal endorsed by the president despite almost unanimous criticism as outrageously extravagant and unnecessary. Olympia, Washington, January 14th. Arthur B. Langley, Republican and former mayor of Seattle, was certified as governor of Washington today after the failure of a die-hard attempt of the Democratic legislature to protest his election. A long period of political uncertainty was ended when a joint session of the House and Senate declined by a vote of 97 to 45 to refer the protest to a special committee. Langley will be inaugurated tomorrow. The fight against him was conducted strenuously by Seattle gamblers and supporters of former Senator C.C. Dill, the Democratic candidate. Washington, D.C., January 14th. William Green, president of the American Federation of Labor, today declared the CIO strikes in the Eaton Manufacturing Company plants in Michigan and Ohio were deliberate attempts to sabotage the National Defense Program. Green asserted that R.J. Thomas, president of the CIO United Automobile Workers, must be held responsible for the strike. He demanded that Thomas be removed from the Labor Policy Advisory Committee of the National Defense Commission. New York, January 14th. 2 young payroll bandits, brothers, shot to death a protesting victim in an elevator of a midtown building, then raced into crowded Fifth Avenue, terrorized throngs of noonday shoppers, killed a patrolman, and wounded a taxi driver and a bank guard. The chase, which led through a block of long department stores at 5th Avenue and 34th Street, ended with one of the bandits lying in the street wounded by the patrolman he shot fatally, and the capture of the second gunman in a 10-cent store. Assistant District Attorney Jacob J. Rosenblum said the bandits were Angelo DiStefano, age 29, and his brother Joseph, 35. The latter, Rosenbaum said, had 3 guns and Angelo 2. A 6th gun was found in a taxi which the robbers abandoned during the chase. Both bandits are ex-convicts, Angelo being out on parole. Rosenblum told this story of the holdup and killings. Alfred Klossman, manager of the Kemp and Beatty, a linen firm, stepped into the elevator of his building at 34th and 5th Avenues shortly after noon, carrying the firm's payroll of $642.92, which he had just obtained from the bank. Ahead of him was one of the bandits, behind him the other. George Grebe, elevator operator, was ordered to start up and keep his head to the front. Grebe said he heard the gunman demand the money and Klossman cry, "No, no, no." Klossman was shot in the head and back, and Grebe was demanded to take the car down. Flourishing their guns, the killers darted into the street, knocking pedestrians from their way and into the department store of B. Altman and Company. Panicky shoppers and sales girls hid behind posts and counters as the 2 fleeing men, guns in hand, charged through the store and out a Madison Avenue exit. They leaped into a taxicab and ordered the driver, Isidore Etter, to drive fast or we will kill you. A traffic light trapped them, and with drawn weapons, the brothers jumped to the street. Traffic patrolman Edward Mayherf, age 52, fired as the fugitive dashed towards 5th Avenue. Angelo dropped with a bullet in his leg and feigned death. As Mayer stood over him, the robber fired from the ground. A bullet struck the patrolman's chest as he fell, dying. As Angelo attempted again to escape, Leonard Weisberg, another cab driver, and William C. Mueller, bank guard, leaped upon him. Attempting to wrest the gun from the killer's hand, Weisberg was shot through the neck. A passerby, Frank Nicholson, a department store employee, finally overpowered Angelo. Minutes later, Joseph was captured by two patrolmen as he ran through the basement of a Woolworth store, waving one of his guns. As the 2 patrolmen marched Joseph away, he reached for his right trousers pocket. There, on a string suspended within the trouser leg, a police found another revolver. A third weapon was concealed in a coat pocket. District Attorney Thomas E. Dewey called the record of the DiStefano brothers staggering, and he declared he would seek indictments tomorrow. He said both men had been arrested 5 times in the past, and both had served terms in Sing Sing prison, Joseph having been there twice. At the police station, Lena DiStefano identified the robbers as her brothers. She said Joseph was deported to Italy 3.5 years ago after a conviction, and that she had not known of his return to this country. She said 2 brothers were now in prison. West Palm Beach, Florida, January 14th. In his first public utterance since the big liner Manhattan piled up on a sandbar Sunday night, skipper G.V. Richardson said today that no one person is entirely to blame. It is what is known as one of those things, Captain Richardson said, adding that he was on the bridge when the Manhattan went aground off Lake Worth Inlet. We were approaching the shore, and while changing our course to go south along the coast, and while the vessel was swinging, it grounded on a sandbar about 1/2 mile offshore. He said the crew obeyed the orders given and behaved splendidly. Baggage of the 200 passengers who were taken ashore yesterday was removed to a tug. The heavy oil and water cargo was pumped out to make the luxury liner more buoyant for the continuing attempts to float the ship. And now for local and regional news. A deluge of protests against President Roosevelt's war dictatorship bill poured into offices of the Chicago chapter of the America First Committee yesterday. More than 28,000 messages, telegrams, telephone calls, and letters were received. Lists of those who protest the Roosevelt measure will be attached to positions and mailed to congressmen in the districts in which those persons live. More protests are expected today. The offices of the committee are on 80 East Jackson Boulevard. The telephone numbers are Wabash 5473, 5474, 5475, 5476, and 5477. All was bedlam yesterday in the committee offices with 50 volunteer workers attempting to handle the avalanche of messages. They did it too, Mrs. Johnson Ayer Fairbank, vice chairman of the Chicago chapter, said proudly last night. I don't know how, but they did. We expected many calls, but we didn't expect anything like this. From early yesterday until late last night, the 4 telephones, another will be installed today, rang continuously. Postmen dumped bags of mail on the floor every few minutes. Messenger boys delivered batches of telegrams. Long, eager lines stood outside waiting to sign petitions. 8 volunteer telephone girls working in 1-hour shifts listed names and addresses of those who called. Other workers, most of them volunteers, transferred names to petitions. Others sorted mail, interviewed visitors, and handed out literature. Telephone company officials reported 2,200 busy signals indicated all telephones in the office were in use. During a 3-hour period in the morning, there was no let-up all day. National headquarters of the America First Committee at 141 West Jackson Boulevard gave up trying to phone the Chicago chapter. Outgoing calls from the chapter offices were impossible, and workers who had to make them went to outside phones. Every telephone caller turned in an average of 5 names. One woman read 117 names and addresses over the telephone, and many callers listed from 15 to 35 persons. We'll take care of everyone as quickly as we can, Mrs. Fairbanks said. If the lines are busy, try later. We must defeat this bill that would set up a dictatorship in the United States and plunge us into war. New and larger headquarters for the Chicago chapter will be open Friday in the People's Gas Building, 122 South Michigan Avenue. The telephone numbers will remain the same. During the day, the National Executive Committee of America First, headed by General Robert E. Wood, met with members of the National Committee and demanded full and open hearings on the Roosevelt bill. Representatives of the group will be named to appear before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Besides General Wood and Mrs. Fairbank, the following attended the meeting: Clay Judson, Sterling Morton, William H. Regnery, and R. Douglas Stewart, members of the Executive Committee, Mrs. Bennett Champ Clark, wife of the Senator from Missouri, Miss Catherine Lewis, daughter of John L. Lewis, Dr. A.J. Carlson, J. Sanford Otis, and Amos R.E. Pinchot, New York attorney, all members of the National Committee. In an address before the Aurora Exchange and Rotary Clubs yesterday, Brigadier General Thomas S. Hammond, chairman of the Chicago chapter, asserted that not until we have made ourselves secure should any of the implements of war we make be sent from here to any land on the earth. Washington, D.C., January 14th. President Roosevelt today called 47 additional National Guard units into active service for a year, including the 33rd Division of Illinois. The White House announced that the effective date for the order will be announced by Secretary of War Henry L. Stimson. Tentative War Department plans call for the units to begin training on or after February 3rd. It is expected that all units will be in training by the end of February. The 33rd Division will go to Camp PA, Tennessee, where a cantonment is being built. The division was to have been called for a year's active service January 3rd, but delay in camp construction forced postponement of the call. In addition to the 33rd Division, the President's order summoned the 28th Division from Pennsylvania, the 29th Division from Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia, and the District of Columbia, the 34th Division from Iowa, Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota, the 40th Division from California, Nevada, Utah, and the 43rd Division from Maine, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Vermont. The call was the largest made under the program for the absorption of the National Guard into federal service. No official estimate was made of the number of men affected by the order, but it was said that the total would pass either of 3 previous calls. Large-scale purchases of fresh meat for the nation's armed forces, combined with other factors yesterday, brought these developments affecting the packing industry, the livestock producer, and the consumer. Number 1, retail meat prices in Chicago reached the highest January levels in the last 4 years. Number 2, buyers at the stockyards paid the highest prices for this season in several years, with steers at an 11-year January top. And number 3, the number of sheep and lambs on the farms being prepared for market is the largest ever recorded. Chicago Packing Company spokesman said that increased purchases of meat for Army and Navy personnel at a time when market receipts of cattle were usually small had caused the price rise. The retailer dealer is paying approximately 5 cents a pound more for pork and 4 cents a pound more for beef and lamb than before Christmas. He is paying 8 cents a pound more for some cuts of beef than in January 1940. 6 cents a pound more for some cuts of pork and 6 cents more for certain cuts of lamb. Meat prices have advanced faster this month than during any January since 1934, when national developments considered inflationary had boosted the markets. Normally, meat prices start upward soon after the turn of the year, but rarely go sharply, Packer said. A year ago, prices turned downward until April. Hogs and cattle fattened on the farm during the spring and summer usually are shipped to market late in the fall and early in the winter. When this shipping has been completed, prices usually begin to rise. Springfield, Illinois, January 14th. Names of 8 members of Dwight H. Green's cabinet became public today before the close of his first business day in the executive offices in the Capitol building. 4 names were sent to the state Senate this morning, where the appointments were confirmed under a suspension of the rules supported unanimously by the senators present. Senate rules would have entailed a delay of at least a day. The governor had planned to send 4 other cabinet appointments to a post-midnight session of the Senate, which was expected to meet for final passage of emergency appropriation bills. The new Republican majority in the Senate, however, unexpectedly declared an end to the old custom of taking important action with the arrival of the new legislative day and recessed until 9:30 tomorrow morning. Jefferson City, Missouri, January 14th. Democrats in both houses of the Missouri legislature used their superior number today to override Republican contentions of constitutional violations and score their second victory in a turbulent session. In Indiana, the right of Democrat Henry F. Schricker to be governor was challenged on a charge of alien voting in Lake County. In Georgia, Eugene Talmadge became governor for the 3rd time and once took steps to set up a one-man regime. In an all-night session last Friday, tightly knit Missouri Democratic majorities denied the governor's chair to Republican Forrest C. Donnell and ordered a legislative investigation of his 3,613 plurality. Donnell has appealed to the state Supreme Court. All of the court's 7 judges are Democrats. Salaries paid to employees of the Cook County government increased 53%, and the number of employees rose 16% from 1932 to 1940. This was shown yesterday in a comparison of records for the 2 years. Meanwhile, county commissioners prepared to consider requests for another record-breaking budget for 1941. Department heads have asked for appropriations totaling $23,099,000, which, if granted, would result in the largest budget for a non-election year since 1930. Their figures will be considered this morning when the Finance Committee of the County Board holds its first budget meeting. In 1932, salaries paid to employees of the 29 departments operating under the county's corporate fund totaled $6,359,559, records show. By 1940, the total for the same departments had jumped to $9,562,790, an increase of $3,203,231. During the same period, the number of employees increased from 3,573 in 1932 to 4,147 in 1940, a gain of 574 payrollers. The increase of more than $3 million in salaries during 8 years more than accounted for the rise in the total corporate appropriation for salaries and other expenses. This appropriation increased from $19,658,724 in 1932 to 22,170,961 in 1940, a gain of 2,512,237. Springfield, Illinois, January 14th. Leaders of both parties in the state Senate today approved a legislative program which probably will result in a permanent $52 million pegged levy for the Chicago Board of Education. The present peg is at $48 million. Agreement to advance such a bill to third reading for passage, roll call tomorrow, came after J.B. McCahey, president of the school board, and Douglas Sutherland, secretary of the Civic Federation and Bureau of Public Efficiency, got together on reductions in the board's building tax levy, which is scheduled for a 20-cent cut by 1943. Sutherland, who is trusted by the legislators as a sort of sentinel for the taxpayers, agreed with President McCahey that the $4 million increase in the education fund is necessary, since virtually the same sum formerly diverted to the board from state gasoline taxes has been returned to the road fund. Springfield, Illinois, January 14th. Death-proof highway construction was emphasized this afternoon by Walter A. Rosenfield in an interview discussing the immediate future of the Illinois road development. Earlier in the day, Governor Dwight Green appointed him of Public Works, which includes the Division of Highways. In the next 4 years, said the new director, primary consideration is to be given to modernizing highways that, because they are outmoded, are taking a heavy toll of lives and limbs. The terminal facilities into and through cities, including Chicago, are a most urgent factor in this problem of fitting pavements to the new demands of traffic. And there will be no more scandals in the Illinois Highway Department. This administration will have no pets among contractors or material men. Mrs. Jenny Rogers, 26 years old, was critically burned yesterday when she went to the rescue of her daughter, Ramona, age 4, in the blazing kitchen of their home at 2711 Adams Street. Ramona was severely burned before her mother could beat out the flames in the child's clothes. Both were taken to the county hospital. Mrs. Rogers, who is soon to become a mother again, was in too serious a condition to be questioned. Policeman Joseph Cardello and J.R. Brewitt, however, expressed the opinion that the kitchen had caught fire while she was in the basement and that she had plunged into the flames to get Ramona. The policemen were on the ambulance call next door when they noticed the smoke. Firemen quickly extinguished the flames. Mrs. Rogers' husband, Vernon, is an express company employee. And in sports, the 1941 contract affairs of the Cubs, which had been dragging along at a snail's pace, picked up some speed yesterday, but not in a way to calm the fear that several of the boys are conspiring to chisel more money from their employer. 6 signed documents were received during the day by General Manager James Tim Gallagher, but with one exception, they came from second-string performers or rookies. The lone exception was Al Todd, last season's chief Cubs workman back of the plate. Todd, who is visiting here, insists he isn't at all disturbed by the fact that 4 upstarts will be attempting to capture his number 1 rating during the impending training exercises in California. 2 other catchers were included in yesterday's acceptances, one being Bob Collins, who served in the Cubs bullpen last year, and the other, Bob Sheffing, drafted from the Rochester club. Charlie George, the Greek backstop purchased from Nashville, joined up last week. The 5th member of that department is Clyde McCullough, who returned his contract unsigned. Accompanying the rejected document was a note in which the athlete pointed out that he is a $7,500 workman, not one of the $6,000 variety. The other fellows represented in yesterday's deluge were pitchers Ken Lefty Raffensperger and Vance Page, and Barney Olson, an outfielder. Barney was with the Cubs on the 1940 spring tour, subsequently going to Tulsa for possible development. Dominic D'Alessandro is the only other fly chaser under contract. The only infielders already in line are 3 shortstops. 2 more White Sox contracts were filed away at Comiskey Park, leaving only 3 to go out of a squad of 34 candidates. Yesterday's acceptances took in pitcher Joe Haynes, recently purchased from Washington on trial, and Warren Martin, a kid pitcher from the Jonesboro, Arkansas farm team. Pete Appleton, Clint Brown, and Larry Rosenthal are the gentlemen who thus far haven't joined the parade. The annual meeting of the Cubs stockholders will be held today, and so far as is known, the most important bit of business at hand will be President P.K. Wrigley's report that last season wasn't a financial success. The sale of 1,000 shares of stock in the Chicago White Sox baseball team to Mrs. Grace Reedy Comiskey, widow of the late J. Lewis Comiskey, owner of the club, was authorized in an order signed yesterday by probate judge John F. O'Connell. The order was entered on the motion of the First National Bank of Chicago, executor of the Comiskey's estate, which informed the court that it must sell the stock to defray expenses of administering the estate, including taxes. The sale of the stock to Mrs. Comiskey at not less than $125 a share will eventually vest control of the baseball team in the Comiskey family. Last year, Mrs. Comiskey renounced her husband's will, thus giving her claim to 1/3 of the estate. The remaining 2/3 will be shared equally by their 3 children, Dorothy, 21 years old, Gracie Lou, 19, and Charles, 15, when the estate is distributed. The order, signed by Judge O'Connell, also authorized sales by the bank of $44,000 of Comiskey's real estate holdings and securities to the White Sox baseball club, thus keeping a large share of his estate intact under the corporate name of the baseball team, which his family will control. New York, January 14th. Battling from behind and short in manpower, the Detroit Red Wings held the New York Rangers to a 3-3 draw in a National Hockey League game tonight. Down 2-0 at the end of the first period, Detroit tied the score in the second on 2 goals by Sid Abel. In the third, each team scored once. The Wings, with only 12 men when the game started, finished with 10. Gus Giesebrecht, speedy center, was injured on the first play of the game when he crashed into the Ranger defense, and Abel was injured early in the third period. Lynn Patrick and Clint Smith scored for the Rangers in the opening period. Abel's goals, one with but 15 seconds in the second period remaining, brought the crowd of more than 10,114 to its feet. On the first, he shifted around the Ranger rear guard on a solo sortie, and on the second, he took a pass from rookie Joe Fisher before letting go a drive. Dutch Hiller put the Rangers ahead 30 seconds after the start of the third period, and the teams went into scoreless overtime after Bay Pratt, Ranger defenseman, deflected a shot by Sid Howe into the Ranger net with little more than 4 minutes of play remaining. Milwaukee, Wisconsin, January 14th. A barrage of successful long shots in the second half enabled the Duquesne University basketball team to overcome Marquette's 11-4 halftime lead and defeat the Hilltoppers 24-18 tonight. It was the 8th victory this season for the unbeaten Dukes. New York, January 14th. 2 quintets long regarded as being among the best in the Midwest, DePaul of Chicago and Bradley Tuck of Peoria, will meet 2 of New York's high-scoring fives in Madison Square Garden tomorrow night. DePaul faces Long Island U in the feature, while Bradley will engage St. Francis College of Brooklyn in the opener. Some of the top-ranking players of the National Basketball League will be in action when the Chicago Bruins meet the Akron Goodyears in the 132nd Regiment Armory, Madison and Rockwell Streets tonight. Topping the list is Ben Stephens of the Goodyears, who scored 15 points against Detroit Monday night to bring his total for the season to 159, far more than have been scored by any other player in the circuit. Also with the Goodyears will be Marvin Huffman, captain of the Indiana team that won the National Collegiate title last season, and John Pelkington, former Manhattan star. The Bruins list will include Bill Hapek, Wibbs Coutts, and Mike Novak. The Bruins, who have won 4 games and lost 5, can pass the Goodyears and take third place in the standings by winning tonight. The Goodyears have broken even in 14 games. The Richie Grahams and K Sports of the Windy City League will meet in the preliminary game. Owners of the 10 National Football League teams will meet in the Blackstone Hotel tomorrow morning to discuss the selection of a candidate for Commissioner of Professional Football. The meeting was made necessary when Arch Ward, sports editor of the Chicago Tribune, recently declined an invitation to accept the position, which would give the commissioner even more power than K.M. Landis exercises as Commissioner of Professional Baseball. A year ago, Mr. Ward declined a 10-year term as president of the National League at an annual salary of $25,000. Nearly a dozen candidates are understood to be under consideration by the 10 club owners. It is not likely, however, that a definite decision will be reached in tomorrow's meeting. And that is sports, and that is the news for Wednesday, January 15th, 1941. Henry Chop reporting. Have a wonderful day.